And turning our attention now to western New York. Over the weekend, Democrats from 7 counties gathered in Geneseo to interview potential candidates for the special election in New York's 26th district. And as expected, they decided on Erie County Clerk Kathy Hochul. She will now be facing off against Republican Assemblywoman Jane Corwin, and it looks like at least one other candidate in an election set for May 24th. We're joined now by the Democratic candidate, Kathy Hochul. Thanks for your time, Kathy.
My pleasure, Liz.
And congratulations. Welcome to the race.
Thank you.
So actually, I just want to ask you first, we've known for a while that there was this vacancy because of Chris Lee's abrupt resignation, and the Republicans immediately tapped Jane Corwin in February. It's been a little while. What took so long for you to make this decision?
Well, the Democrats wanted to go through a different process than the Republicans. I mean, there was no coronation. This was a process where they wanted to make sure that they could solicit a lot of opportunities for people to show their interest throughout the 7 counties. People were interviewed by telephone last week, and then there were personal interviews. So we just really learned about the date of the race in a very short time ago, so we did not jump the gun the way the other side did. We went to a more deliberative process. And that's where we are today.
So you've always been considered the front runner, though, and then even right before the meeting there were reports coming out of Washington that sort of you were it, that you had already been selected. Do you really believe that this process was fair?
No, I was not selected early, and I just disagree with that assessment. I had some decision making to do as well, and as you know, people were asking me to look at another race, and it's very flattering to be asked to run for other opportunities. So there was a lot involved there. So it was not a slam dunk in my opinion, and I was very pleased to have the unanimous support of the 7 county chairs.
The other race you're talking about is a challenge to Erie County Executive Chris Collins, is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. Was there any sort of call from Albany for you to do that? Because I know there's been speculation that the Cuomo administration was perhaps interested in seeing Chris Collins go down, since he did at one point want to run for governor.
Again, I was very flattered to be considered as a front runner for that race by the Democrats, and certainly I had conversations with people, but I'll tell you right now, my heart is running for this congressional race. This is what I know, this is where I can make the most difference for the people of upstate New York, and that's where my heart is. That's why I'm going for this race.
Is it hard, though, knowing that at least 2 seats in New York are going to be gone? One of them we assume is going to be upstate. I mean, this is a district that could change considerably if it exists at all, assuming that in 2012 that the lines get redrawn by that election cycle.
Well, actually, we'd be engaging in hypotheticals to consider the redistricting at this point. Right now, all I know is there's people in that district, the 26th congressional, who are without representation in Washington. So I'm anxious to get this special election underway, May 24th. I'm anxious to be elected by the people and start carrying their voice to Washington as soon as possible. 2012 elections are a long way off. There's much to be done in Washington between now and then.
Okay, so at this point now, we now have yourself and Jane Corwin definitely in the race. This morning you had Jack Davis file upwards of about 11,000 signatures. That's a lot of signatures. So you only need 3,500 good ones to get on as an independent candidate. He is sort of a wild card, and then you have David Bellavia, maybe. I mean, all of this splitting of the vote in already a district that has a GOP dominance in terms of enrollment, doesn't that make your task even more difficult?
I disagree with that. I think that I welcome all comers in this race. I think it's very democratic that other people have the opportunity to petition into it, so it's not just the person with the biggest checkbook or the biggest wallet that's able to buy a seat in Congress. I think this is a very democratic process, and I think it's great to have more candidates involved, and we each take our message. My message will be very strong about my record in the county clerk's office, of how we've cut waste, do whatever we can to hold down taxes, and basically help businesses create jobs. I don't know if people know this, but all new businesses in Erie County start in the county clerk's office. So I've given them a helping hand for years, and I understand what their needs are. So that's what this is all about. And the more people in the race, I welcome all comers.
Well, is it possible then on the flip side, because there also was speculation that the Democrats from Washington were watching to see that if this got very crowded, perhaps they would actually support you stronger because it dilutes the race, if you will, for Jane Corwin, maybe. I mean, at this point, it's difficult to tell. A special election is such sort of a crapshoot, isn't it? I mean, you just don't know. You've got this consolidated amount of time with a wide number of people running, and it's difficult to say what is going to happen.
Well, clearly, I'm not waiting for any signal from party leaders at the national or the state level to make my decision. I think my record is more of one as independent. And you can ask the last couple of governors, Eliot Spitzer and David Paterson, about me asserting my independence on issues where I didn't think were good for the people of my own county, whether it was the mandatory license plates that were being proposed that I fought tooth and nail, and as a result, we saved $129 million for the motorists of this state, or illegal immigrants getting driver's licenses. So my own party not being, anointing me, I don't have a problem with that. I want to go out there and talk to the people. And I think my greatest strength is the crossover appeal that I have demonstrated in my election for county clerk. Just a few months ago, I was elected with 80% of the vote. A lot of Republicans, conservatives, independents, and Democrats found the way to support me because they know my track record of fighting waste, holding down taxes, and helping businesses. And that's exactly the message I want to take to Washington. We can do in Washington what I've done very successfully here in the county clerk's office. So I didn't need the high sign from any Democratic leaders to go ahead. I'm in this race to win.
Did you, if I remember correctly, you introduced Andrew Cuomo. You were one of 3 people who introduced Andrew Cuomo at the Democratic convention in Rye. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. So do you expect that maybe you'll get some assistance from the governor now that you've made a decision, regardless of whether or not he may have wanted you to do something else? I mean, might you be supported by the Cuomo administration?
I anticipate the Democratic leadership is going to want to see a Democrat take this seat because they need someone who actually knows how to work on both sides of the aisle. I want to be able to roll up my sleeves, work with Brian Higgins, work with Louise Slaughter, work with all the delegation to focus on jobs for upstate New York. So I think Andrew Cuomo has very successfully carried that message here. I've been at his speeches locally, and I think the upstate New Yorkers are responding to his message. So I would anticipate we could team up and convey the same message to Washington, create jobs, hold down taxes, and do the best we can for the taxpayer. So I'd welcome his support, certainly.
Okay, on the taxing issue, though, you already have the NRCC out this morning with this web video that they are calling you a tax and spend Washington lobbyist. I mean, obviously, this is from days before you were involved in Western New York politics. You were working down for 2 members of Congress, if I remember correctly. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the former senator, and then LaFalce, correct, the former congressman?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, I had that experience. They're great.
Do you have a response to this? They're basically focusing on your votes when you were a town board member, I believe.
Right, right. And I think what they want to do is try to deflect from my many accomplishments as a county clerk, where we saved $1 million by relocating an auto bureau, where I've encouraged people to renew their licenses and their registrations online, saving, again, millions of dollars. Everything I've done as a county clerk, representing almost 1 million people, I've done to help the bottom line of the taxpayers. So people who voted for me before, who know me the best in this area, know that I'm a hard fighter for the taxpayers of upstate New York, and I want to continue to do that. You know,
early on, if I recall correctly, you also said that this wasn't going to be a race for amateurs. This was something that would require someone who really had experience. And I'm curious if did you mean that your Republican opponent or your likely Republican opponent at that point, or what was it that you were talking about at that moment?
I think people who know how to make government work. I've taken broken government and made it work here in Erie County. If you want to ask any of the thousands of customers who come into our auto bureau, if they're satisfied with their government, how they spend their taxes in my area, they're satisfied. I've given them good return on their dollars, and that's what I've done. I know how to fix broken government, and I want to take that to Washington. There are many inefficiencies there that I know from my experience as a county clerk and my time in Washington. I know how to fix that. The duplication, the redundancies that are found, so many different agencies dealing with the same topics. I know how to get the job done, and that's why I have strong support from members of the business community, farmers, citizens, people all over know that I'm a fighter. That's my reputation, and that's what we need in Washington. People that are not judged or make a decision based on party label, who's proposed it, but I want to work across both sides of the aisle to help our residents. So I think that's the kind of experience I have. My government experience will translate very well to being an effective voice for the people of this district.
Well, how does that contrast then with Assemblywoman Corwin? I mean, certainly she has a couple of years now in Albany. Is that not sufficient experience in your opinion?
I'm not aware of having to balance budgets and make ends meet the way we've had in the county government, and it's a different skill set. It's a very different skill set to understand the operations of government. So I'm very confident in my skills, but not just sitting in an office and voting the way your party tells you to vote is different than actually getting out there, helping the people, and helping solve problems. And that's what my skills are.
Okay. I mean, in terms of, I want to ask you also about 2 things that are going on right now at the national level. One, of course, is the attacks on Libya that the president has finally determined that he would do over the weekend. Are you in support of that? And do you believe that it took too long for the president to get to that decision, as some people are saying?
No, something that's serious, engaging our young men and women in uniform, should be deliberated. We should not be responding the way we did in Iraq, where you just jumped in, it seems, without proper forethought. I think what the president's trying to do is gather a coalition similar to what we did in the first Gulf War, where you make sure that the United States is supported and is part of a larger organization of people from the Arab states and the rest of the world to make sure that it's a unified voice. We do not want to fly solo anymore in these engagements. We cannot afford to do that. Our economy is still reeling from what we've done in the previous wars. We have to get back on track and be very, very deliberative, just as Secretary of Gates and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton have done so. So I support what the president is doing in that regard.
And just in parting on Indian Point and nuclear power in general, there's been a lot of concern about that. We see that the Obama administration will be meeting with members of the Cuomo administration tomorrow in Washington. Do you believe that there is cause for concern in shutting down Indian Point or other nuclear power plants in New York at this point?
I think what happens is when you have a situation that we're experiencing here in Japan, all of a sudden it focuses the nation's attention on the safety and security of our own nuclear operations. Whether, number one, they're immune from attack from abroad, and that's a homeland security issue. We've had to make sure that we've secured those. In addition, any security leaks or any issues that could occur from an environmental change. So I have no trouble with the review of those at this time, but all I know is we need to do our very best to get good, clean energy here in America to eliminate and end finally our dependence on foreign oil, which has had a stranglehold in our country since the 1970s with the OPEC oil embargo. So I think we need to do what we can is look at a comprehensive energy policy, and I've got some plans I'll be unveiling shortly in that.
Okay, well, we look forward to that. I hope you'll be willing to come back on and speak with us. Kathy Hochul, thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liz.